Hello, my name is Lauren Power, and this is my biology final. So let's start. Charles Darwin discovered evolution and natural selection. Originally, he was interested in what animals' traits had to do with their habitats and studied finches in the Galapagos Islands. But eventually, he stumbled across a much larger topic: evolution. The Merriam-Webster definition of evolution is a theory that the various kinds of plants and animals are descended from other kinds that lived in earlier times, and that the differences are due to inherited changes that took place over many generations. These inherited changes were most likely due to natural selection, which is a process that weeds out weak traits and weak members of a species. Have you ever heard of survival of the fittest? Yeah, that's natural selection. As written in Campbell Biology textbook of Concepts and Connections, Darwin realized that numerous small changes in populations as a result of natural selection would eventually lead to major alterations of species. An example of this would be the peppered moth found in Britain and Ireland. When the moth's wings were speckled or peppered, it blended in better with the tree trunks that it rested on during the day. Black moths, however, do not have camouflage, and so they are easily eaten by predators. Because the speckled moths blend in, they survive to pass on their traits. Oftentimes, organisms with proper camouflage, good ability to tolerate physical conditions, and methods to obtain food and escape predators are the ones who survive to pass on their genes, eventually transforming the future of the species into organisms like them. Some people are skeptic about the theory of evolution because they think that scientists are just making pure conjecture and have little proof, or people may not believe in evolution from apes because of religious affiliations. Either way, scientists do have proof of past life, in the form of fossils. Fossils are imprints or remains of past organisms. Usually the only thing left is the bones or outline of bones, but scientists and paleontologists can use this to hypothesize when and why certain adaptations in a species would have occurred. Imprints such as footprints or poop provide grounds for behavioral analysis, and whole organisms can even be preserved in ice or amber. Using the surrounding rock of the fossil, paleontologists can use the layers of strata to organize a general time period in which the organisms existed. DNA analysis is also another way to determine organism linkage. Using molecular biology, scientists can compare the DNA of species to see if they share a common ancestor. This homology contributes to the grouping of populations in the tree of life. DNA can even be manipulated in artificial selection with selective breeding for desirable traits. Embryonic selectivity is becoming more and more common as time goes on. Adults are actually choosing what they want their children to look like: what color eyes, what color hair, etc. The question arrives, is this ethical? Scientists argue that selecting the strongest embryo to prevent disease and increase the likelihood of birth versus miscarriage is what justifies it. But the feeling of infringing upon the will of nature and God still remains. Now, I want you to remember 3 things about the topic of evolution. 1. Individuals do not evolve. 2. Only heritable traits are altered. And 3. Evolution is not goal-directed and does not lead to perfectly adapted organisms. Moving on, a way to trace evolutionary history is by illustrating cladograms or the tree of life. Cladograms are especially useful when trying to pinpoint the appearance of a certain adaptation or the disappearance of one. For example, humans have an appendix which is completely useless to them, so why do they have it? It is possible that an ancestor of ours made use of the appendix to digest food, and it has lost its function since. The topic of this final exam is to predict what a human will look like in the future. If we take a look at a cladogram of human descent, we can predict their future appearance and characteristics. Humans differentiate from the primal ancestors for many reasons. One of the main reasons is that they are bipedal, which means they walk on 2 legs. The human pelvis is angled more vertically versus the ape pelvis, angled horizontally. The most prominent difference in the pelvis of these 2 species is the gluteus medius and the gluteus minimus, which are hip extensors, known as anterogluteals, and they are used to stabilize humans rather than propel apes. Humans apply a vertical force to the ground, up and down, while apes apply a horizontal force, left to right. The first sign of bipedality we see is in the Australopithecus afarensis, named Lucy. What are the possible speciation events that cause the shift from apes to become Homo erectus and eventually, through a series of variations, the modern-day Homo sapien? Speciation events can be environmental changes, random changes in population, or geographic, sexual, reproductive isolation. Along the way, different species can mate, forming a hybrid offspring that could potentially create a hybrid population. So what will humans look like in the distant future? Hard to tell. It depends on who gets sexy with who. Other factors that we'll have to consider for future appearance are global warming, technology, and space travel. The Earth is gradually getting warmer due to human activity, like the use of greenhouse gases. As the ice caps melt, the water level is projected to at least raise by 1 foot by the year 2050. This will put a large amount of land underwater, and if this pattern continues, the Earth will grow hotter because of no polar balance. Human skin will likely get lighter to reflect light rather than to absorb it. It is also possible that the speciation event global warming will decrease the amount of hair on the human body to help ventilate because hair holds in warmth. People who are easily subject to skin disease from the sun, such as melanoma, will likely die off because of the UV rays being allowed into the atmosphere. Global warming is pushing us to pursue life on other planets. In the event that Earth does get destroyed, let's talk about Mars. Mars is a lot colder than Earth, so humans would need to evolve to retain more heat. These phenotypes will be darker skin to absorb more heat, and maybe hairier bodies to provide an extra layer of fur, so the opposite of what we just talked about. Because Mars has little gravitational pull, humans would quickly lose muscle mass in their legs. Bones in the feet, legs, and back would eventually become thinner as well. Spider. Sorry about that. So, as I was saying, bones in the feet, legs, and back would eventually become thinner and weaker because they are not needed for much support. If this evolved species of humans were to ever come back to Earth, they would have a very tough time just moving in our atmosphere. They would also likely be taller on Mars because, again, the gravitational pull is a lot less. So picture tall, skinny people. Additionally, our immune system would take time to evolve through natural selection and vaccines to the new planet. Let's take a step back from biology for a second and take a more historical view at the immune system. When the Europeans started their conquest of Africa, they were being mowed down by malaria until they found that the quinine plant could be a vaccination. When the Europeans settled in the Americas, they exposed the native population to diseases that they had no immunity to, such as smallpox and chickenpox, and their populations were wiped out. The Europeans developed immunity over time. The Native Americans developed immunity over time as their white blood cells became able to protect themselves from unwanted pathogens and bacteria. When bad stuff is detected, the B white blood cells are stimulated to produce antibodies, which are proteins that attach themselves to those antigens. These are now called antigen-antibody complexes. This only locates the antigens. It doesn't kill them. So the T white blood cells come in to help. The T cells call in phagocytes, which kill the bacteria or virus. When the white blood cells become sensitized to the antigens, or the antibodies, the body becomes immune. So yes, it is highly possible that the majority of people sent to Mars would have to live inside spacesuits, otherwise being killed by new bacteria. Another way to overcome the challenges placed on humans by our atmosphere or just life in general, or other people's atmosphere like Mars, is technology. So the future of evolution is shifting away from biological evolution towards genetically altered evolution and technological enhancement. Our bodies are still evolving naturally, or have been in the past hundreds of years, in order to suit our environment. For example, people living in high altitude have a hemoglobin that binds more oxygen, making it easier for them to breathe. Another example is the transformation from dark skin to light skin in order to synthesize vitamin D and absorb UV rays from the sun. But as technology advances, scientists are looking for a way to extend who and what we are by fusing technology with biology. There is multiple cyborgs that exist right now, functioning with the advantage of technology. For example, a man named Harbison has a fiber optic sensor and chip implanted in his brain that enables him to hear the vibrations of colors because he's colorblind. Scientists have also found a way to genetically alter a person's gene or select embryos over others. But first, let's talk about genetics, just to understand this better. Genes carry instructions that control the mechanisms in a cell and production of protein. Genes are made of deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA for short. Do you know the twisty thing you see all the time that kind of looks like a twisted ladder? Yeah, that's the DNA double helix. This double helix is bound together by multiple hydrogen bonds. The subunit adenine binds only with thymine, and the subunit guanine binds only with cytosine. Parents pass on their DNA to their offspring. The law of segregation states that a sperm or egg carries only one allele for each inherited character because allele pairs separate from each other during the production of gametes. This decides the physical characteristics and genetics of the child. The probability of a child receiving a certain trait can be predicted in a Punnett square. CRISPR is a procedure that switches out DNA sequences. This is an astonishing development because it could be used to treat diseases, but also to alter a person's physical makeup, like reducing the effects of aging. Scientists and couples could also participate in choosing an embryo that is healthier and more intelligent than its surrounding embryos. As technology advances and CRISPR and embryonic selectivity become more available to the public and more heavily researched, the question remains, is altered evolution genetics ethical and morally acceptable? I don't know. With all of this considered, we are brought back to the question, what will humans look like in the future, and how will this impact their evolution going forward? So we've gone over multiple variables, but nothing can truly be predicted. There could be a natural disaster tomorrow for all we know, and our entire population could be wiped out forever. So my final answer to this question is, it depends.